Here is a question that a lot of people are looking for an answer to. What is the Quad or the Quadrilateral Dialogue? It dominated the headlines all of this week. Nikkei Asia, for example, announced the Quad has come of age. The diplomat asked whether India can mold the Quad for its own gain. The Voice of America said the Quad is countering China's vaccine diplomacy. Chinese mouthpiece Global Times called it a publicity stunt, a loose group. But what is this group all about? What is the Quad? What are its objectives? And why is India a part of this group? We'll answer all of these questions on this episode of Gravitas Plus. Hello and welcome. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. On your screen is the map of the Indo-Pacific. It is basically a maritime space. It stretches from the Indian Ocean to the West Pacific Ocean. These are the countries in the Indo-Pacific: Australia, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Brunei, Cambodia, Fiji, India, Indonesia, Japan, Laos, Malaysia, the Maldives, Myanmar, Nepal, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, Thailand, Timor-Leste, the United States and Vietnam. What's the one thing most of these countries have in common? A dispute with China. These countries have trade disputes, and these countries have territorial disputes, all with China. The Dragon's designs have jeopardized security in the Indo-Pacific. China has refused to respect internationally accepted maritime laws, challenged the rules-based order, claimed some islands, built artificial ones. Basically, China has become a threat to peace in the Indo-Pacific, and this is where the Quad comes in. Its prime objective now is to contain China. The Quad began as an ad hoc grouping in the year 2004. This was after the Indian Ocean tsunami. More than 2 lakh people had died then across 14 countries. It was one of the deadliest natural disasters in history. India, the United States, Japan and Australia came together to form the Tsunami Core Group. These 4 countries contributed over 40,000 troops, humanitarian responders, dozens of helicopters, cargo ships and transport planes. The group of 4 worked towards tsunami relief and reconstruction. The group did not issue any communique or create a secretariat. When its purpose was solved, the group was dissolved. This new style of diplomacy impressed the world. Cut to 2006, inspired by the success of the quadrilateral template, former President of Japan Shinzo Abe proposed an arc of freedom and prosperity, a group meant to promote freedom and the rule of law. Soon, then Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited Tokyo. India and Japan issued a joint statement. The 2 countries expressed their eagerness to begin a dialogue with like-minded countries in the Asia-Pacific region. In 2007, US Vice President Dick Cheney signaled interest in a Quad dialogue. In April 2007, Shinzo Abe visited India. 1 month later, the first meeting of the initial Quad was held. This was on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum in Manila. In September 2007, Japan and Australia joined the US-India Malabar exercises. China became uncomfortable. It began voicing concerns about the Quad. It was being called an Asian NATO. Protests and hesitations followed. Soon the Quad crumbled. 1 decade later, in 2017, the stage was once again set for the Quad to return. India and the US had signed the LMOA. India and Japan had signed the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement. Japan had permanently joined the Malabar exercises. Xi Jinping was in power, and under him, China was more aggressive than ever. It had engaged India in the Doklam standoff, ticked off Japan by increasing Coast Guard activity near the Senkaku Islands, bribed several Australian politicians, and was caught doing so. So in 2017, when Shinzo Abe returned to power, he wasted no time in calling for a democratic security diamond, aka Quad 2.0. Representatives from 4 countries met in Manila in November 2017. This time, there was little hesitation in standing up to China. Foreign ministers of the Quad met thrice between 2019 and 2021, and then came the March 12th summit. I would have called it historic, but knowing just how often we misuse that word, I'll instead call it a landmark summit. The leadership of India, the United States, Japan and Australia met virtually. On the agenda was development, Wuhan virus vaccination, cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, climate change and technology, and chain management. They even released a joint statement. This was a first. It was called The Spirit of Quad. Here's something interesting. The document, not for once, mentions China. but it carefully outlines the group's plans of containing China. Together, we commit to promoting a free, open, rules-based order rooted in international law to advance security and prosperity and counter threats to both in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. We support the rule of law, freedom of navigation and overflight, peaceful resolution of disputes, democratic values and territorial integrity. Every word points at China without mentioning it. The joint statement goes on to say, we are committed to leveraging our partnership to help the world's most dynamic region respond to historic crisis so that it may be the free, open, accessible, diverse and thriving Indo-Pacific we all seek. Now the question is, how do they take it beyond words? Will the Quad be effective against Chinese aggression? Militarily speaking, it is far more powerful. Just look at the numbers. China's military personnel, 3.36 million. The Quad, 7.78 million. This is after taking into account the active personnel, the reserve and the paramilitary. If you consider just the active personnel, the numbers look like this. China, 2.19 million. The Quad, 2.93 million. But it's not so cut and dried. War does not always have to be fought militarily. Trade and commerce today are just as effective. 3 out of 4 Quad countries have already banned Chinese telecom giant Huawei from the 5G race. Huawei, remember, was supposed to be China's stairway to tech dominance. India has banned more than 220 Chinese apps. The ban on TikTok alone is expected to cost China $6 billion. These are small steps that have a big cumulative impact. My point is, wars today do not necessarily involve the army. Wars can also be waged on a country's soft power. The Quad knows this way too well. Why else do you think the 4 member countries decided to strike China's vaccine diplomacy? During the summit, the Quad members spoke about Wuhan virus vaccines. They promised to deliver 1 billion doses to the Indo-Pacific by 2022. China wants to buy global support through vaccine diplomacy. The Quad is countering that. They're pooling in America's technology, Japanese finance, India's production capacity, and Australia's logistics capability. It is also focusing on new age technology. We know how China loves that sector. So how has China reacted to all of this? The spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said, we hope that relevant countries will keep in mind common interests of the regional countries and uphold the principle and do things for regional peace, stability, prosperity, rather than the opposite. Right after the summit, Global Times published this article. It said the fundamental reason for these 4 countries to unite is not because of their so-called democratic values, but geopolitics. They are unwilling to see China's rise and are afraid of China's strength. China sees the Quad as a threat to its expansionism, and that's no surprise. But what's funny is that the dragon was lecturing India on democracy in this article. Add it to your reading list under the comedy section, we say. Now you know what the Quad is. So let's move on to the next question. What's in it for India? A lot. It can secure a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council with the help of the Quad. It can upgrade its defense manufacturing technology, become a major blue economy, seek economic cooperation, become Atmanirbhar, and shape the changing world order. But India needs to strike a balance. New Delhi must keep in mind that its engagement in the Quad does not jeopardize its standing in the BRICS or the SCO. And China, remember, is a member of both these groupings. There are challenges before the Quad too. It cannot reduce itself to being an anti-China grouping. The challenge before the Quad is to get China to behave itself without fighting it militarily. Will it be able to do so? For now, the members seem confident.